The morning my husband kissed me goodbye and told me he loved me was the same morning he signed papers that would have left me with nothing. I didn't know that then. I was standing at the kitchen counter in my pajamas, pouring a second cup of coffee, watching him straighten his tie in the hallway mirror. He looked the same as he always did. Pressed shirt, expensive watch, that easy smile he wore like a second skin. 14 years of marriage and I still thought that smile meant something. Don't wait up, he said. Big client meeting tonight. Okay, I said, I love you. He said it back. And then he was gone. My name is Serena, and I need to tell you what happened after that door closed. We lived in a house in Naperville, Illinois. A 4-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch and a backyard. My husband, Miles, always said we'd turn into something beautiful someday. We never did. There was always a reason to wait. The market, his caseload, a deal he was closing. Miles was a corporate attorney at a firm downtown, the kind of man who wore his ambition openly and called it dedication. I had been a paralegal when we met. I gave that up after our daughter was born. My mother-in-law, who never liked me, said I'd made myself dependent. At the time, I thought she was being cruel. I understand now she was just telling me the truth earlier than I was ready to hear it. Our daughter, Hazel, was 13. She had Miles's dark eyes and my stubbornness. And she was the best thing in my life by a margin I couldn't measure. My mother lived 40 minutes away in a condo in Downers Grove. She called every Sunday. She sent clipped newspaper articles in the mail because she didn't trust email with anything important. For the most part, I thought my life was fine. Not perfect. Miles had grown distant in the past 2 years, more irritable, quicker to criticize. He traveled more. He was on his phone constantly in a way that felt private, not professional. I noticed. I told myself I was imagining things, the way you tell yourself a check engine light will sort itself out if you just drive carefully. I stopped telling myself that on a Tuesday in March. Hazel had a half day at school, and I picked her up at noon. She wanted Chipotle, so we drove through, and we were sitting in the parking lot eating when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, made a face I didn't recognize, and tilted the screen away from me. Who's that? I asked. Nobody. I know my daughter. That wasn't nobody. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said quietly, Mom, there's something I think you should see. But I don't want you to freak out in the car. We went home. I sat at the kitchen table and she put her phone between us. She had found, by accident she swore, through a mutual follow on Instagram, a private account, not well hidden. Just hidden enough that I'd never looked. The account belonged to a woman named Tara. She posted the way women post when they want someone specific to see it. Weekend trips to wine country. Dinners at restaurants Miles had told me were overpriced. Flowers with no caption, just a single red heart emoji. And in one photo, from 4 months ago, the background. Our firm's holiday party. Miles's hand at the small of her back. I sat there for a long time without saying anything. Hazel was watching me the way children watch their parents during earthquakes, trying to figure out how scared to be based on the adult's face. I'm okay, I told her. I wasn't. But I needed her to believe it long enough for me to figure out what to do next. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed while Miles slept next to me, and I stared at the ceiling and I thought about every trip, every late night, every time I'd asked if everything was okay and he'd said yes. He was just tired. Work was a lot right now. I thought about the checking account he'd moved to a separate bank 18 months ago, which he said was for investment purposes. I thought about the way he'd stopped reaching for my hand. In the morning I called my mother. Not to tell her, I wasn't ready for that, but just to hear her voice. She talked about her neighbor's dog and a sale at Jewel-Osco, and I sat at the kitchen table and cried silently, while she talked and let myself feel, for exactly 12 minutes, like I was still someone's child who could be taken care of. Then I hung up and I called a lawyer. Her name was Gwen, and a friend from my old book club had used her 2 years prior and described her as the kind of woman you want in your corner when your back is against the wall. Gwen was in her late 50s, wore reading glasses on a chain, and had the particular calm of someone who had seen every version of human betrayal and was no longer surprised by any of it. I sat across from her desk and told her what I knew. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she folded her hands and said, Before you do anything else, before you confront him, before you change any passwords, before you say a single word to anyone except me, I need you to understand something. The way you handle the next few weeks will determine a great deal about how this ends for you. I understood. He's an attorney, she said. He knows exactly what he can move, hide, and restructure before any of it becomes discoverable, which means we need to move carefully and faster than he expects. She recommended a forensic accountant. She told me not to touch the joint accounts. She told me to start documenting, quietly, without confrontation, without tipping my hand. She told me to go home and act normal. Acting normal is the hardest thing I have ever done. Miles came home that evening with takeout tie and a story about a deposition that had gone sideways. And I sat across from him at the dinner table and asked follow-up questions, and laughed in the right places, and watched his face for some sign of the man I thought I'd married. I couldn't find him. I'm not sure he was ever there, or if I had just been very good at believing he was. Hazel knew something was happening. She was 13 and sharp, and she kept looking between us at dinner with those careful dark eyes. After Miles went to his office to review briefs, she came to find me in the laundry room. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked. "I'm going to be very okay," I said. And for the first time, I meant it. Over the next 3 weeks, Gwen's forensic accountant, a quiet man named Ray who wore the same gray cardigan every time I saw him, began working through our finances. What he found made my stomach drop in stages, like an elevator with a failing cable. Miles had been systematically moving money for nearly 2 years. Not large amounts at once, nothing that would trigger automatic flags, but steadily, methodically, into accounts I didn't know existed. He had restructured his ownership stake in a real estate investment he'd brought into the marriage as a joint asset. He had, Ray told me in his flat, effectless voice, also recently updated the beneficiary on a life insurance policy. He had removed my name. He had added hers. I sat in Gwen's office and looked at the paperwork, and I felt something shift in me. Not the hot, blinding kind of anger that makes you want to throw things. Something colder and quieter, the kind that makes you very still. "How much time do we have?" I asked Gwen. "I think he's planning to file first," she said. "I think he wants to have as much restructured as possible before he does. But he doesn't know we know." She looked at me over her reading glasses. "Which is our advantage." I went home. I made dinner. I watched a movie with my husband on the couch and let him fall asleep to me, and I thought about 14 years, and a wraparound porch, and a backyard we never finished. The thing I keep coming back to, even now, is the life insurance policy. He hadn't just restructured assets. He hadn't just hidden money. He had looked at a form with my name on it, and he had typed her name instead. That's not carelessness. That's a decision. That's someone deciding, in a specific moment, that you are no longer the person they choose. That took me a long time to stop thinking about. 2 days before Gwen was ready to file, Miles came home early. I was in the home office, his home office, technically, though I'd started spending time there when he wasn't home, which he didn't know. I had the desk lamp on and raised spreadsheets on the table, and I heard the front door open, and my heart went completely still. I closed the folder. I walked out into the hallway and said, "Hey, you're early. Meeting got canceled," he said. He was looking at me in a way that was slightly off, the way people look when they're trying to read you without appearing to. "What were you doing in there?" "Paying bills," I said. He nodded. He went to the kitchen and got a glass of water and stood at the counter scrolling his phone, and I stood in the doorway watching him, and neither of us said what we were actually thinking. That night, I called Gwen from my car, parked 2 blocks from the house. "He's getting close to something," I said. "So are we," she said. 2 more days. I went back inside. I made tea. I sat in the living room and watched the news. My husband came and sat beside me, and for one strange moment he reached over and put his hand over mine, and I let him. I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe he was performing. Maybe, somewhere under everything he had become, some old part of him remembered what we had been. I don't know. I took my hand back after a moment and said I was tired and went upstairs. The next morning, Miles for work, and I drove Hazel to school, and then I met Gwen at her office and we filed. It's a particular kind of moment, signing documents like that. Final. The pen makes almost no sound on the paper. Gwen had timed it precisely. Before he could be notified, before he had any warning, the filing triggered a mandatory financial disclosure and an automatic temporary restraining order on all marital assets. The accounts he'd been slowly draining, frozen. The real estate restructuring, flagged for discovery. The beneficiary change on the life insurance, which had been done within the look-back period, noted. His attorney called Gwen 40 minutes after the papers were served. According to Gwen, he was, in her words, not pleased. Miles called me 14 times between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. I let every call go to voicemail. My mother came and picked up Hazel from school that day, and I sat in Gwen's waiting room with a cup of bad coffee and a magazine I didn't read, and I waited. The voicemails started controlled and ended somewhere else entirely. By the 7th one, the careful professional tone was gone. He called me ungrateful. He said I had ambushed him. He said I didn't understand what I'd done. He said he had wanted to handle this like adults. I thought about the life insurance policy. I thought about the accounts he'd been emptying for 2 years, while I made dinner and helped our daughter with homework, and believed, with extraordinary faith, that the man sleeping next to me was someone I knew. I didn't call him back. What Miles had not accounted for, and this is the part that still brings me a feeling I can only describe as bleak, clarifying satisfaction, was that moving money the way he had, with the methods he'd used, left a very clear trail when someone was actually looking for it. He was a corporate attorney. He knew how to structure deals. He did not know, apparently, how thoroughly a forensic accountant could reconstruct 18 months of financial maneuvering from bank statements, wire transfers, and digital records. He'd been careful. He had not been careful enough. And there was the matter of the woman herself. It came out during discovery, which Miles's attorney attempted repeatedly to limit, that Tara was not simply a girlfriend. She had received money, directly from accounts that had been marital funds, over the course of their relationship. Not a little money. Enough money that the word dissipation of marital assets appeared in Gwen's next motion, which carries, in Illinois divorce proceedings, very specific legal weight. I won't say that Gwen smiled when she told me this. She's too professional for that. But she did take off her reading glasses and set them on the desk with a kind of quiet deliberateness that I took as the equivalent. Miles's attorney's strategy shifted after that. The calls stopped. The aggressive posturing softened. The proposed settlement that came through 3 weeks later was, relative to where we'd started, almost reasonable, which meant Miles had finally understood that the ground he'd been planning to fight on had collapsed beneath him. My attorney was not almost reasonable. She was exacting. The final agreement took 4 more months. I got the house. I got my share of the retirement accounts, properly valued. I got a settlement that reflected the real value of the real estate he'd tried to restructure. I got child support. I got a spousal maintenance arrangement long enough to allow me to complete the paralegal recertification I'd already quietly enrolled in at the community college in Wheaton. Miles got exactly what he had tried to avoid: accountability. He moved into an apartment in the city. I don't know if Tara is still in the picture. I stopped tracking that particular detail once it stopped mattering, which happened sooner than I expected. My mother cried when I told her everything. Not from sadness, she said, from relief. I never told you this, she said, because I didn't want to color how you felt, but I never trusted him. She pressed her lips together. I should have told you. It wouldn't have mattered, I said. I had to find out in my own time. She nodded. She made tea. We sat at her kitchen table and she held my hand across the surface of it, and I thought about all the ways love announces itself quietly, and all the ways betrayal does the same. Hazel found out the full story gradually, the way children do, in pieces over time processed at her own pace. She is, as I said, remarkably sharp. She was angry. She cried. She asked me hard questions I answered as honestly as I could without putting things in her head that were too heavy for her to carry. She's 14 now. She still has her father's dark eyes and my stubbornness. She asked me once, a few months after the divorce was final, if I was sad. I thought about it seriously, the way she deserved. Sometimes, I said, but mostly I feel like I took a door that had been stuck for a long time and finally just pushed it. Oh, she thought about that. Was it scary, terrifying, I said. She nodded like that made sense. Like that was actually the correct answer. I'm not someone who believes the universe operates according to a reward system. I'm not sure I believe in karma the way some people do, as a kind of cosmic ledger. But I do believe in the law. I believe in a forensic accountant named Ray in a gray cardigan. I believe in a woman like Gwen, who has seen every version of this story and still shows up every morning, ready to fight for whichever woman is sitting across from her desk. And I believe in timing. The particular grace of doing the right thing at the exact right moment, so that when the other person finally understands what's happening, it's already done. Miles had spent 2 years quietly dismantling what I thought we were building. He was methodical and patient, and he thought he knew exactly how it was going to go. He did not know I had started paying attention. That morning he kissed me goodbye and told me he loved me. I don't think about it the way I used to. It doesn't fill me with rage anymore. It fills me, honestly, with something closer to pity. That he stood in my kitchen and said those words and then got in his car and drove toward a life he was constructing without me. A life built on what he was taking. That he thought that was invisible. I think about the house now differently. I repainted the living room in November. A warm cream color I'd always wanted and Miles always said looked too yellow. I started a garden in the backyard in spring. Nothing elaborate, just raised beds with tomatoes and herbs and 2 rows of sunflowers along the fence. My mother comes over on Sundays now instead of just calling. She brings food and she sits on the porch and she talks while I water things. And it is, honestly, one of my favorite parts of the week. We didn't get around to finishing the backyard when Miles was here. Turns out, I just needed him to leave.